The impact came without warning. One moment I was pedaling my bike down Willow Lane, the autumn breeze playing with my hair, and the next everything shattered. The sound of screeching tires, the blur of a black SUV, and then nothing but the sensation of flying through the air like a broken doll. In that split second before impact, time seemed to freeze, and a strange thought crossed my mind: is this how it ends, God? I remember every detail with crystal clarity. The worn leather of my backpack straps digging into my shoulders, my sketchbook full of half-finished drawings bouncing against my back, and the leftover chocolate chip cookies from Sarah's house still warm in my front pocket. Mr. Turner had just called out his usual "be careful, kiddo" from his porch, and I had waved back, thinking about the art project due next week. Then came the crash. The sound was deafening, metal twisting, glass shattering, and somewhere in the chaos I heard someone scream. Was it me? I couldn't tell anymore. My body spun through the air, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of the driver's face through the windshield. His eyes were wide with horror, and he wore a priest's collar. That image burned itself into my memory before everything went black. But darkness wasn't the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. The void that engulfed me wasn't like normal darkness. It was absolute, all-encompassing, yet strangely peaceful. There was no pain, no fear, just a profound silence that seemed to cradle my consciousness. I couldn't feel my body anymore, couldn't feel the rough asphalt that had torn into my skin or the broken bones that should have been screaming in agony. Instead, there was only awareness, floating in an endless sea of nothingness. And then I saw a pinprick of light in the distance, so faint at first that I thought I was imagining it. But it grew stronger, expanding and intensifying until it filled my entire field of vision. The light wasn't harsh or blinding, it was warm and inviting, like the first rays of dawn after the longest night. It called to me, not with words, but with a pull so gentle yet irresistible that I couldn't have resisted even if I'd wanted to. As the light enveloped me, I began to hear something, a melody so beautiful it made my soul ache. It wasn't like any music I'd ever heard before. It was pure crystalline, like the sound of love itself transformed into song. And somewhere in that harmonious symphony I heard a voice calling my name. Emily. Why, just one word, but it contained universes of meaning. It was filled with such profound love and understanding that tears would have streamed down my face if I'd still had a physical form. I knew that voice, though I'd never heard it before. It resonated not in my ears, but in the very core of my being. Through the golden radiance, I saw a figure approaching. With each step, the light seemed to pulse and shimmer, as if reality itself was responding to his presence. I knew, with a certainty that transcended all doubt, that I was in the presence of Jesus Christ himself. What happened next would change not just my life, but the lives of countless others. It would tear my family apart before bringing them back together in ways I never could have imagined. It would challenge everything I thought I knew about faith, love, and truth. And it would start me on a journey that would test every ounce of courage I possessed. But in that moment, suspended between life and death, between the physical world and something far greater, I was simply a 12-year-old girl about to receive a message that would shake the foundations of everything I believed in. Little did I know that the priest who had hit me, Father Michael, would become one of my strongest allies in the struggle to come, or that my atheist brother James, who had always mocked my faith, would be forced to question everything he thought he knew about science and religion, or that my best friend Sarah held a secret that would change everything. The light grew brighter, and Jesus extended his hand toward me. "We have much to discuss, Emily," he said, his voice echoing through my soul. "Are you ready to hear the truth?" I reached out toward him, and as our hands met, I understood that nothing would ever be the same again. Don't miss the truth that could change everything. Join us on this extraordinary journey by subscribing to witness Emily's divine revelation unfold. Before I tell you about what Jesus revealed to me, you need to understand my family, especially my brother James. Dr. James Harper, the brilliant neurosurgeon who valued science above all else. 12 years older than me, he was both my tormentor and protector, the person who could make me question everything while simultaneously being the one I'd run to when monsters haunted my dreams. Our family dynamics were complicated. Mom taught Sunday school and believed with her whole heart, while Dad walked the line between faith and skepticism, attending church mainly to keep peace in the family. But James? He was the vocal atheist, the black sheep who'd turned his back on our family's religious heritage the moment he entered medical school. Emily, he'd say during our weekly family dinners, his surgical precision evident even in how he cut his meat, "You're too smart to believe in fairy tales. The human brain creates these experiences. It's all neurons and chemicals, nothing more." He'd glance meaningfully at the cross I wore around my neck, a gift from our grandmother before she passed. I remember the Christmas when I was 10, just 2 years before the accident. James had brought home his latest research paper on near-death experiences, explaining them away as misfiring synapses and oxygen deprivation. Mom had left the table in tears, and Dad had given him that disappointed look that seemed reserved specially for their firstborn. But what really set James apart wasn't his atheism, it was his dedication to saving lives. He worked at St. Mary's Hospital, ironically enough, and was known for taking on cases other surgeons deemed hopeless. "Science is my religion," he'd say, "and the operating room is my church." His patients adored him, even though he refused to pray with them like the other doctors did. Our relationship was a strange dance of contradictions. He'd mock my faith one minute, then spend hours helping me with my science homework the next. He funded my art classes but rolled his eyes when I painted biblical scenes. When I was diagnosed with asthma at age 9, it was James who stayed up all night researching the best treatments, while simultaneously telling me that prayer wouldn't help my breathing. The week before my accident, we had our biggest fight ever. I'd written a paper for school about miracles in modern times, and James had found it on the kitchen counter. He spent an hour debunking every case I'd cited, his voice getting louder and more frustrated as I refused to back down. "You're living in a fantasy world, Em," he'd said, running his hands through his perpetually messy hair. "One day you'll have to face reality, and it's going to hurt. I'm trying to protect you from that pain." Maybe you're the one who's afraid, I'd shot back, surprising both of us with my vehemence. Afraid that there might be things in this world that your precious science can't explain. He'd stared at me for a long moment, something flickering in his eyes that might have been concern or fear or maybe both. "When you're older," he'd said finally, "you'll understand." Little did either of us know that in just a few days everything would change, that James would be forced to confront evidence he couldn't explain away with his medical textbooks, that his sister's fantasy world would crash headlong into his reality in ways that would shake his scientific certainty to its core. The last thing he said to me before the accident was, "Don't let Mom fill your head with too many stories." He was heading to the hospital for a 36-hour shift, his travel mug of coffee in one hand and a medical journal in the other. I'd stuck my tongue out at him, and he'd ruffled my hair like he used to when I was little. If I'd known what was coming, the accident, the revelation, the way our whole world would turn upside down, would I have said something different? Would I have tried harder to make him understand that faith and science didn't have to be enemies? Or would I have simply hugged him tighter, knowing that soon his entire worldview would be challenged in ways he never could have imagined? But that's the thing about life-changing moments. They rarely announce themselves in advance. They just arrive like a speeding SUV on a quiet autumn afternoon, and nothing is ever the same again. Looking back, I realized my faith had been wavering even before the accident. It's hard to admit that now, but living with a brother who constantly challenged my beliefs had planted seeds of doubt that grew like persistent weeds in my mind's garden. Every Sunday morning was a battlefield in our house. Mom would be up early laying out our church clothes with a determined cheerfulness that seemed almost desperate. Dad would quietly put on his suit, his face a mask of careful neutrality. James, when he was home, would make a point of reading his medical journals at the breakfast table, occasionally making cutting remarks about mass delusion and primitive superstitions. I sat through Pastor Williams' sermons with growing unease, my mind spinning with questions I was afraid to ask. When he spoke about absolute faith, I thought about James's patients who died despite endless prayers. When he talked about miracles, I heard my brother's voice explaining them away with medical terminology. The simple faith of my childhood was becoming complicated, twisted with thorns of doubt. My best friend Sarah was my only confidante about these struggles. We'd sit in her backyard after school, sharing cookies and secrets. Sometimes I whispered to her one afternoon, "I wonder if James is right. What if it's all just stories?" Sarah had squeezed my hand but said nothing. I didn't know then that she was carrying her own burdensome secret, one that would later change everything. The church youth group became increasingly difficult to attend. Other kids seemed so certain, so secure in their beliefs. They quoted Bible verses with unwavering conviction while I sat in the back, sketching in my notebook and wrestling with questions that felt too dangerous to voice. When we were asked to share testimonies, I would make up safe, simple stories about answered prayers for good grades or found pets, never revealing the storm of uncertainty raging inside me. Mom noticed, of course. She'd find excuses to come into my room late at night, perching on the edge of my bed with worry lines creasing her forehead. "Faith isn't about having all the answers," Emily, she'd say, smoothing my hair. "It's about trusting even when we don't understand." But how could I trust when doubt had become my constant companion? The breaking point came 2 weeks before the accident. During Sunday school, Mrs. Peterson was teaching about Daniel in the lion's den. A younger kid asked if God still performs miracles like that today. Before Mrs. Peterson could answer, I heard myself say, "My brother says what people call miracles are just coincidences or things science hasn't explained yet." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Peterson's face had gone pale, and I could feel the other kids staring. Word spread quickly through our small church community. Some parents started keeping their children away from me, afraid I'd infect them with my doubts. Pastor William called a special meeting with my parents. That night I heard them arguing downstairs. Mom was crying, Dad was defending my right to ask questions, and James, who'd stopped by for dinner, was loudly proclaiming that it was about time someone in the family started thinking critically. I slipped out to the backyard and looked up at the stars, the same stars Abraham had supposedly counted. "God," I whispered, "if you're really there, why do you make it so hard to believe? Why don't you just show us a sign that even James couldn't explain away?" I didn't know then that I was about to get an answer to that prayer in the most dramatic way possible. I didn't know that my wavering faith was about to be transformed into something entirely different, something that would challenge not just James's skepticism, but everything our church had taught me to believe. The next day I started avoiding the other church kids at school. I stopped raising my hand in Sunday school. I even considered telling Mom I was too sick to go to church. My faith felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breath of doubt. And then came the accident. Then came the light. Then came the truth that would change everything. The moment Jesus took my hand, the golden light around us grew warmer, more intimate. It wasn't just light anymore. It was like being immersed in pure love and understanding so deep it made my heart ache. His eyes held the weight of eternity, but also a gentleness that made me feel completely safe. "Emily," he said, his voice resonating through my very being, "what do you know about the crucifixion?" I answered like I would in Sunday school, reciting the familiar story about his death and resurrection. As I spoke, I noticed a subtle sadness in his expression, like a parent watching a child repeat a well-meaning but incomplete understanding. "The story, you know," he said gently, "was shaped by the needs of its time. But now humanity is ready for a deeper truth." He waved his hand, and suddenly we were surrounded by images. Ancient Jerusalem materialized around us, so real I could smell the dust and hear the crowd's murmurs. "Watch," he said, and I saw the events unfold, but not as I'd learned them. I saw Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, but this time I saw something more, a man approaching him in the darkness, their whispered conversation, an exchange of looks heavy with meaning. "His name was Benjamin," Jesus explained, "a man of extraordinary faith and courage. When I told him what needed to be done, he didn't hesitate. The scene shifted to show this Benjamin, his face weathered but peaceful, accepting a cup from Jesus. My physical body needed to appear to die," Jesus continued, "so that I could continue my work beyond Judea. But the crucifixion itself, the suffering, the death, that was Benjamin's gift to humanity." I watched, tears streaming down my face, as Benjamin took Jesus' place. The transformation was subtle but perfect. Those who wanted to see Jesus on the cross saw him. The mystery and power of divine love made it possible. But it was Benjamin who bore the nails, who felt the thorns, who gave his life so that the greater mission could continue. "But why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why couldn't you just tell people the truth?" Jesus smiled sadly. "The people of that time needed a different kind of hope. They needed to believe in the power of sacrifice and the victory over death. Benjamin's willing sacrifice made that possible, while allowing me to continue spreading the message of love to lands beyond." The scene shifted again, showing Jesus traveling to distant places, India, China, lands I didn't recognize. In each place he taught, healed, and shared the message of divine love, while in Jerusalem, the story of his death and resurrection gave birth to a new faith. But now, he said, turning to me with an intensity that made my soul tremble, humanity is ready for a more complex truth. They are ready to understand that divine love works in ways more mysterious and beautiful than simple stories can convey. I saw Benjamin's family being cared for in secret by the disciples who knew the truth. I saw Jesus returning occasionally in disguise to guide the early church. I saw the careful preservation of this secret through the ages, waiting for the right time to be revealed. "Your brother, James," Jesus said, surprising me with the mention of my sibling, "represents those who seek truth through science. The story they've rejected is indeed incomplete, but the truth, the real truth about divine love and sacrifice is greater than either blind faith or pure reason can grasp alone." I thought about James, about his dismissal of everything supernatural, and felt overwhelmed by the task ahead. How can I possibly make anyone believe this? "You won't be alone," Jesus assured me. "There are others who have glimpsed this truth. Sarah, your friend, she knows more than she's told you. And the priest in the SUV, his role in your story is no accident." The light around us pulsed with what felt like ancient power. "The time has come for a deeper understanding of divine love," Jesus said. "One that unites faith and reason, that honors both the miracle of Benjamin's sacrifice and the greater purpose it served." Looking into his eyes, I knew this was why I had been chosen, not because I was special, but because I understood both doubt and faith, both questioning and believing. In my heart, where James's skepticism had battled with my mother's faith, this new truth found fertile ground. When I first opened my eyes in the hospital, everything was a blur of fluorescent lights and beeping machines. But there was something else, the sound of someone praying, their voice choked with tears. As my vision cleared, I saw him, the priest from the SUV, kneeling beside my bed, his collar askew and his face lined with guilt. "Father Michael," a nurse said gently, touching his shoulder, "she's awake." He looked up, his blue eyes red-rimmed from crying, and I saw the same face that had been frozen in horror through the windshield moments before impact. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe in his mid-30s, with prematurely graying hair and hands that trembled as he gripped his rosary. "Emily," he whispered, "can you ever forgive me?" The rawness in his voice made my heart ache. Here was a man of God who had accidentally struck down a child, the ultimate test of his own faith. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. Father Michael quickly offered me water, his hand still shaking. As I sipped, I noticed something odd about him. There was a darkness in his eyes, a shadow that went deeper than just guilt over the accident. "I was on my way to submit my resignation," he confessed quietly, settling back into the chair beside my bed. "I've been struggling with my faith, questioning everything I've devoted my life to. I was driving too fast because I was running away from God." He laughed bitterly. "And instead I nearly killed one of his children." I wanted to tell him about my experience, about Jesus and the truth I'd learned, but something held me back. Not yet. Instead, I reached for his hand, noticing how he flinched at first before accepting the contact. "The parish will assign someone else to this hospital," he continued, staring at our joined hands. "I can't. I don't deserve to minister to anyone after what I've done." "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "You need to stay." The conviction in my tone surprised us both. Over the next few days, Father Michael became a constant presence in my hospital room. He was there when James stormed in, demanding to see my medical charts and arguing with the doctors about treatment plans. He witnessed my brother's skepticism firsthand, saw how James dismissed our mother's prayers as emotional coping mechanisms. "Your brother reminds me of myself lately," Father Michael confided one afternoon. "I've been reading scientific papers on consciousness, near-death experiences, trying to explain away the mysteries of faith with clinical terms." He paused, studying my face. "But there's something different about you now, isn't there? Something changed while you were away." I met his gaze steadily. "Would you believe me if I told you?" "After what happened?" "After spending days watching you heal faster than any of the doctors can explain." He leaned forward. "Emily, I think you might be the answer to prayers I was too afraid to voice." That's when I knew this man, this priest who had nearly ended my life, was meant to be part of my journey. Jesus had said his role was no accident, and now I understood why. Father Michael was the perfect bridge between old faith and new truth, between rigid doctrine and living revelation. I met Jesus, I said simply, watching his face, and what he showed me, it's going to change everything. Father Michael didn't react like I expected. There was no dismissal, no quick reassurance that I'd been dreaming. Instead, tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Tell me everything." And so I did. As the afternoon light filtered through the hospital window, I shared my experience with the first person outside my family. With each word, I watched the shadow in Father Michael's eyes begin to lift, replaced by something that looked a lot like hope. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, "This will cost me my position in the church if I stand with you." "I know," I replied. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him. Good thing I was planning to resign anyway. The day I learned I was dying started like any other hospital morning. James was checking my charts as usual, his doctor mask firmly in place despite the dark circles under his eyes that betrayed his lack of sleep. He'd been obsessively monitoring my recovery, looking for scientific explanations for my miraculous survival. But this morning was different. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the test results. "EM," he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time since the accident. "We need to talk." The tremor in his voice made my stomach clench. James never showed vulnerability, not even when our grandmother died. He sat on the edge of my bed, something he hadn't done since I was little and scared of thunderstorms. The impact caused some internal damage we didn't catch initially. His medical vocabulary slipped away, replaced by simple, devastating words. "Your heart, Emily. It's failing." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, chosen to share a divine truth, and my own heart was betraying me. According to James, I had months, maybe a year if we were lucky. The medications might buy some time, but without a transplant, my future was sealed. "Don't tell Mom and Dad yet," I whispered. James looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. "I need time to think." That night, after everyone had gone home, I felt the familiar warmth of divine presence filling my room. "Is this part of the plan?" I asked the empty air. "To make my time so short?" The answer came not in words, but in a deep understanding that settled into my soul. This wasn't a punishment or even a limitation, it was a gift. The urgency of my condition would drive my mission forward with an intensity that nothing else could match. Father Michael figured it out the next day. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. When I told him, he didn't offer empty reassurances or even prayers. Instead, he asked, "What do you need from me?" "Help me tell my story," I replied, "before it's too late." We began working together in secret, documenting everything I had seen and learned. Father Michael's theological knowledge helped me articulate concepts that had seemed beyond words. Between rounds of tests and treatments, we filled notebooks with the truth about divine love, about Benjamin's sacrifice, about the real meaning of faith. James caught us one afternoon walking in while Father Michael was recording my description of the golden light. My brother's face went through a complex series of emotions: anger, fear, disappointment, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "This is exactly what you don't need right now," he exploded. "You should be focusing on rest, on following the treatment plan, not indulging in elaborate fantasies with a priest who nearly killed you." Father Michael started to leave, but I grabbed his hand. "Stay," I commanded, finding strength in my purpose. "James, you need to hear this too. What I need is for my little sister to fight for her life." "I am fighting," I said quietly, "just not the way you want me to." The monitors beside my bed began beeping faster as my heart responded to the stress. James immediately switched into doctor mode, checking my vitals and adjusting medications, but even as he worked, I continued speaking. "I know you've noticed things you can't explain, James. The way I'm healing from the accident faster than I should. The readings on your machines that don't make sense. The light that sometimes fills this room when you think I'm sleeping." His hand stilled on the IV line. I'd never told anyone that I'd seen him late at night, standing in my doorway, staring at the golden glow that occasionally manifested around me. He'd run test after test, trying to find its source. There's more to this world than your science can measure, I pressed on, and I don't have time to wait for you to figure that out on your own. Father Michael chose that moment to add, Dr. Harper, I've been documenting everything. The unexplainable readings, the anomalies in her test results, whatever is happening here goes beyond medical science. James sank into the chair beside my bed, suddenly looking every bit as exhausted as he must have felt. You really believe all this, don't you? Both of you. I don't just believe it, I said, I know it. And soon others will know too. Even if it kills you faster, his voice cracked on the last word. Especially then I took his hand, feeling the tension in his fingers. James, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving this truth untold. The afternoon light streaming through my window caught the tears he was trying to hide. My brilliant, logical brother facing something his years of medical training hadn't prepared him for. I can't lose you, Em, he whispered. Then help me. Stop fighting this and help me tell the truth before it's too late. He didn't answer, but he also didn't leave. He sat there holding my hand while Father Michael continued recording my story, his scientific mind wrestling with things he'd spent his whole life dismissing as impossible. Later that night I heard him in the hallway talking to Father Michael. Keep her calm, he was saying. Any stress could accelerate the condition, whatever you're doing with her. Just keep her calm. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. And with my time running out, I would take whatever small victories I could get. Sarah's revelation came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She had been visiting daily since my hospitalization, but this time was different. As soon as she walked into my room, I could tell something was weighing heavily on her mind. She was clutching her worn leather journal, the one she never let anyone read, like a shield against her chest. Emily, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone. She glanced nervously at the door, as if afraid someone might interrupt this moment of truth. I watched as my best friend since kindergarten perched on the edge of my hospital bed, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her journal. Sarah, who had always been my rock, who had sat through countless Sunday school classes with me, who had held my hand during my moments of doubt, suddenly seemed like a stranger. I remember last summer, she began, when I was in that drowning accident at Lake Morrison. How could I forget? She had been underwater for nearly 4 minutes before they pulled her out. The doctors had called her recovery miraculous. I never told you what really happened during those minutes. She flipped through her journal until she found a page filled with drawings that made my heart stop. There, sketched in Sarah's precise hand, was the golden light I knew so well. And in the center of that light, a familiar figure. You saw him too, I breathed. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared to tell anyone. They already thought I was crazy for recovering so quickly. If I told them about Jesus, about what he showed me, she trailed off, her fingers tracing the drawings. What did he show you, Sarah? The same truth he showed you, Emily. About Benjamin. About the crucifixion. About love being greater than any story we've been told. She pulled out more pages from her journal, dozens of them, filled with writings and sketches dating back months. I've been carrying this secret since that day, waiting for. I don't know what. And then you had your accident, and I saw that look in your eyes when you woke up. The same look I see in the mirror every day. I reached for her hand, feeling the connection between us grow stronger. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? She smiled sadly. Before your own experience, would you have believed that everything we've been taught about Jesus needed to be reimagined? She had a point. Even now, with my own testimony burning in my heart, I was struggling to find ways to share this truth with others. But that's not all, Sarah continued, her voice dropping even lower. There are others, Emily. Others who've had similar experiences. I've been finding them online, in support groups and hidden corners of the internet where people share their stories anonymously. She pulled out her phone and showed me message boards and forums where people described encounters with divine light, with Jesus, with truth that transcended traditional doctrine. Most were too afraid to speak openly, fear of judgment and ridicule keeping them silent. We're not alone, she said, her voice growing stronger. And maybe that's why this is happening now. Maybe the world is finally ready for the truth. I thought about what Jesus had told me about humanity being ready for a deeper understanding. How many others have you found? Dozens. maybe hundreds. But they're all scattered, isolated, afraid to connect with each other openly. Some have tried to share their experiences and been ostracized by their churches. Others have been dismissed as mentally ill or attention-seeking. A plan began forming in my mind. What if we brought them together? What if we created a space where people could share their experiences without fear? Sarah's eyes lit up, but then dimmed as she looked at the medical equipment surrounding my bed. "Emily, I know about your heart," James told me. Of course he had. My brother had probably hoped Sarah would talk some sense into me. "Then you understand why we can't wait," I said firmly. "We need to start now. Today." Sarah opened her journal to a blank page. "I'll help you. We'll document everything you experience, my and others we find. We'll create a record that can't be ignored or dismissed." "The truth about divine love," I murmured, told through 100 different voices. 1,000, Sarah corrected, squeezing my hand. "Once people know they're not alone, they'll find the courage to speak." We spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Sarah would be our bridge to others who had encountered the divine truth. Her technological skills would help us create secure spaces for sharing experiences. My story, combined with Father Michael's theological background and James's scientific documentation, would provide the foundation. "Emily," Sarah said as visiting hours were ending, "are you scared about what might happen when we start sharing this?" I thought about my failing heart, about the limited time I had left. I'm more scared of staying silent. She hugged me, carefully mindful of the tubes and wires. "We'll tell your truth," she whispered. "All of our truths. I promise." As she left, I saw her stop to speak with Father Michael in the hallway. He nodded solemnly at whatever she was saying, then glanced at me through the doorway with newfound understanding in his eyes. The pieces were falling into place. Sarah's revelation had opened up possibilities I hadn't imagined. We weren't just sharing a single story anymore, we were uncovering a pattern of divine revelation that had been hidden in plain sight. The backlash began 3 weeks after Sarah and I launched our online community. At first, it was just angry emails and threatening comments, religious zealots calling us heretics, demanding we take down our testimonies. Father Michael helped us filter through the hate, focusing on the genuine stories that continued to pour in from around the world. Then came the first real warning. Sarah was walking home from visiting me when a black van pulled up beside her. "You're spreading lies about our Lord," a man's voice called out. "There will be consequences." She ran all the way to the hospital, shaking as she told me what happened. James wanted to call the police, but Sarah refused. "They'll shut down our website," she argued. "We can't risk losing all those stories." Still, my brother insisted on driving her home every evening after that. We didn't realize then that someone had been watching us all along. The Truth Defenders, they called themselves a radical religious group dedicated to protecting traditional faith from modern corruption. They had infiltrated our online community, gathering information about our supporters. It happened on a Thursday. Sarah had just left my room carrying new journals filled with testimonies we'd collected. Father Michael was supposed to drive her home, but he'd been called away for an emergency. "I'll be fine," she assured us. "It's still daylight." 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The image showed Sarah bound to a chair, her face tear-stained but defiant. The message read, "Remove everything by midnight or she dies. God's truth cannot be corrupted." I'd never seen James move so fast when I showed him the photo. He immediately called the police, but I knew they wouldn't find her in time. The Truth Defenders were too careful, too well organized. Through my rising panic, I felt that familiar warmth, the divine presence that had been my constant companion since the accident. "There's another way," I whispered, closing my eyes. "Emily, this isn't the time for prayers," James snapped, pacing the room. "We need real action." "Watch," I said quietly, and reached for that golden light I could always feel humming just beyond normal sight. The room filled with a soft glow that made James stop in his tracks. I had never tried to channel the divine presence before, had never even known I could. But Sarah needed me, and somehow I knew what to do. In my mind's eye, I could see her not just where she was, but the love that connected us, a shining thread in the tapestry of divine truth. "She's in the old paper mill," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "3 men, they have guns. But they're scared. so scared of what we're revealing. James stared at me, his scientific mind visibly battling with what he was witnessing. The monitors tracking my heart rate were going crazy, but for once he wasn't rushing to check them. "Emily," he started. "Call Father Michael," I interrupted. "Tell him to bring Pastor William. It's time they knew the whole truth, too." While James made the calls, I focused on maintaining my connection with Sarah. I could feel her fear, but also her unwavering faith. Even now, facing death, she believed in our mission. The Truth Defenders had chosen the wrong person to threaten. They thought they were defending God's word, but they had never experienced the true depth of divine love we had encountered. They were about to learn the difference between dead doctrine and living truth. I felt my heart stuttering, protesting the energy I was expending. The doctors had warned me against any stress, but this was more important than my failing body. Sarah had stood by me, had shared her own truth despite her fears. I wouldn't let her face this darkness alone. Through our connection, I sent her the same golden warmth that had embraced me during my near-death experience. "Hold on," I whispered, though she couldn't possibly hear me. "Help is coming, and something else, something they won't expect." James returned with Father Michael and Pastor William in record time. Our old pastor looked deeply troubled, but there was also a hint of curiosity in his eyes as he took in the otherworldly glow that still filled my hospital room. "What you're about to see," I told him, "will challenge everything you believe. But Sarah's life depends on you trusting me." My heart monitor was beeping frantically now, and I could feel James's medical instincts warring with his desire to help Sarah, but for once he didn't try to stop me. "The truth about divine love," I said, my voice growing stronger despite my physical weakness, "isn't just something to be believed, it's something to be experienced. And tonight we're all about to experience it in a way none of us ever expected." The light around us grew brighter, and I felt that familiar presence growing stronger. The Truth Defenders thought they were protecting God's word, but they had no idea what real divine intervention looked like. As my consciousness expanded beyond my failing body, I silently thanked Jesus for showing me that love was more powerful than any doctrine, any threat, any fear. Now it was time to prove it. While the others were preparing to rescue Sarah, Pastor William pulled me aside, his weathered face showing signs of internal struggle. "Emily," he said quietly, "there's something you need to see." From his worn leather briefcase, he withdrew an ancient-looking document protected in a clear preservation sleeve. 3 days ago, I was researching in the church's old archives, seeking answers about your claims," he explained, his hands trembling slightly. "This was hidden behind a loose stone in the basement wall, sealed in a copper box. It's dated around 70 AD. The manuscript was written in ancient Greek, the parchment delicate with age. But what caught my eye were the drawings in the margin sketches that perfectly matched the golden light I had experienced. Pastor William produced a translation he had worked on day and night. It's a letter, he said, from a man named Thomas to his son. In it, he describes being one of the few who knew the truth about the crucifixion. He mentions Benjamin by name, Emily. He writes about the willing sacrifice, about Jesus continuing his work in distant lands. My heart monitor spiked as I read the translation. There, in words penned nearly 2,000 years ago, was confirmation of everything I had been shown. Thomas wrote of being sworn to secrecy, of the burden of carrying a truth that the world wasn't ready to hear. "There's more," Pastor William continued. "Thomas writes about others throughout history who would be chosen to reveal this truth when humanity was ready. He describes them as vessels of light who would face death yet return with divine understanding." I noticed Father Michael had joined us, his eyes wide as he scanned the document. "The church must have hidden these accounts," he whispered. "There could be more like this, scattered in ancient archives around the world." Already on it came James's voice from the doorway. Despite the urgency of Sarah's situation, he couldn't help being drawn into this discovery. "I've contacted historians at 3 universities. They're searching their religious manuscript collections for similar documents." Pastor William's hand shook as he carefully turned a page. "All these years, I thought I understood God's plan. I've preached the traditional story of the crucifixion countless times. But this," he looked at me with tears in his eyes, "this changes everything." "No," I said gently, understanding flowing through me. "It doesn't change the core truth. Divine love is still divine love. Benjamin's willing sacrifice was just as meaningful as we always believed Jesus's was. The power of that sacrifice to transform lives remains the same. The old pastor nodded slowly. Perhaps that's why this truth was preserved for now. People today can understand a more complex story. They can hold multiple truths at once. Father Michael was photographing each page of the manuscript carefully. This will help protect others who come forward with similar experiences. It provides historical context, shows that this knowledge has been preserved through the ages. But first, James interrupted, checking his watch. We need to save Sarah. We can revolutionize religious history after we get her back safely. Pastor William straightened, a new determination in his bearing. Yes, of course. And Emily, he squeezed my hand. I believe you now. Completely. This manuscript, it's written exactly as you speak, with the same understanding of divine love. You couldn't have known these details. A wave of relief washed over me. Having the support of my childhood pastor meant more than I had realized. But he wasn't finished speaking. When we get Sarah back, I want to help you share this truth. The right way, with historical backing and theological context. It won't be easy. Many will resist, just as these truth defenders are doing. But truth has its own power. The golden light that seemed to constantly surround me now pulsed brighter, as if in approval. James noticed, making quick notes in his ever-present medical journal. The manuscript mentions this too, Pastor William said, nodding at the light. Thomas called it the visible manifestation of divine presence. He wrote that it would appear around those chosen to share the truth. Father Michael was already forming plans. We'll need to establish a proper research team. Theologians, historians, scientists. He glanced at James. People willing to bridge the gap between faith and reason. Later I reminded them, though my heart was soaring with the implications of this discovery. Right now, Sarah needs us. As they moved to leave, Pastor William hesitated. Emily, this manuscript, it also mentions the price that truth-bearers often paid, the physical toll of carrying such divine energy. I knew he was referring to my failing heart. Some truths are worth dying for, I said quietly, but I don't intend to die tonight. He nodded gravely, tucking the precious document back into his briefcase. Neither does Sarah. Let's go show these truth defenders what real divine intervention looks like. The light around me pulsed once more, and I felt strength flowing through me despite my weakness. The ancient manuscript had given us something precious, validation that this truth had been preserved through the ages, waiting for the right time to be revealed. Now that time had come, and not even death threats could stop it. The old paper mill loomed before us in the gathering dusk, its abandoned windows staring like hollow eyes. James parked the car a safe distance away, killing the engine but leaving his hand on the keys. Father Michael and Pastor William sat tensely in the back seat, while I focused on maintaining my connection with Sarah through the golden light that now filled the car's interior. I count 3 guards outside, James whispered, his medical bag ready in his lap. He'd insisted on coming prepared for any emergency. 2 at the main entrance, 1 patrolling the perimeter. There are more inside, I said, my voice distant as I saw through the divine presence that surrounded us. 5 men in total. They're keeping Sarah in what used to be the foreman's office, 2nd floor. Pastor William was still struggling to reconcile what he was witnessing. Emily, what you're doing. It's like the prophetic visions described in Scripture. This is more than just visions, I replied, feeling the truth pulse through me. The same divine presence that showed me the truth about the crucifixion is here now, ready to reveal itself to everyone in that building. Father Michael gripped his crucifix. What's the plan? We walk in, I said simply. That's suicide, James protested. They're armed, Emily. We need to wait for the police. I turned to my brother, seeing the fear in his eyes. Do you trust me? I trust science, measurable facts. James, I took his hand, letting him feel the warmth of the light that surrounded me. Do you trust me? He stared at our joined hands, at the golden glow that defied every medical principle he knew. Finally, he nodded. Then help me walk. My heart won't last long, but it doesn't need to. The 4 of us emerged from the car, James supporting me on one side, Father Michael on the other. Pastor William leading the way with a courage I'd never seen in him before. The guards spotted us immediately, raising their weapons. "Stop right there," one shouted. "We're here to speak with your leader," Pastor William called out, his voice carrying an authority that made the guards hesitate. "This is your last chance," another guard warned. "Take down that blasphemous website and we'll release the girl." The divine presence surged through me then, and the golden light that had been contained in our car expanded outward. The guards stepped back, shielding their eyes. "What you call blasphemy," I said, my voice carrying despite its weakness, "is the truth you've been afraid to see." The light grew brighter, and I heard Sarah's voice in my mind, feeling her recognize its presence. Inside the building, the other truth defenders were scrambling, confused by the glow seeping under their doors. "Your weapons can't stop divine love," I continued, each step forward sending waves of golden light rippling through the air. "They couldn't stop it 2,000 years ago, and they can't stop it now." The guards were backing away, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. One dropped his gun, falling to his knees in prayer. We reached the entrance unopposed. Inside, the light revealed everything, every shadow, every hidden corner, every scared man clutching a weapon and questioning his convictions. "Sarah," I called out, feeling her response through our connection. "Emily," her voice came from above, strong and clear. "They're running. The light. They can't handle it." We heard footsteps pounding downstairs, shouts of confusion and fear. 3 men burst from a side door, fleeing into the night, but one remained their leader, who stood at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of righteous anger. "You're twisting God's word," he accused, pointing his gun at me. "The truth has been preserved for 2,000 years. Who are you to change it?" "The truth was preserved," Pastor William spoke up, holding out the ancient manuscript. "But not the truth you think. Read it. See what Thomas wrote about Benjamin's sacrifice, about Jesus' continued work." The man's hand trembled. "Lies. All lies." "Then why can you see this light?" I asked gently. "Why can you feel its love even now?" The golden radiance pulsed brighter, and I felt my heart stutter dangerously. But it didn't matter. The light was showing him everything, the same truth I had seen, the same love that had embraced me. His gun clattered to the floor. I don't understand." "You don't have to understand," I said, fighting to stay conscious as James supported more of my weight. "You just have to let yourself feel it. Let yourself be loved." The man fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as the light enveloped him. And that's when Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, free of her bonds, glowing with the same divine presence. "It's over," she said softly. "They've all seen it now. They can't unsee it." My legs gave out then, my heart protesting its exertion. James caught me, his medical training warring with what he'd just witnessed. But I was smiling, because I knew what came next would change even more lives than this night had. The truth was out now, and it had been revealed not through force, but through the same divine love that had started everything 2,000 years ago. In the aftermath of the confrontation at the paper mill, something extraordinary began to unfold. The Truth Defenders leader, who we learned was named Michael Rivers, sat on the dusty floor of the old building, tears streaming down his face as he held Pastor William's ancient manuscript with trembling hands. "I've dedicated my life to protecting God's truth," he whispered, his voice broken. I was so sure. So certain we were right. Sarah, who had made her way down the stairs, knelt beside him despite everything he'd put her through. "That's the thing about truth," she said gently. "Sometimes it's bigger than what we're ready to see." The golden light still filled the building, softer now but no less present, wrapping around all of us like a warm embrace. I watched from where I lay in James's arms, my heart struggling but my spirit soaring. The other Truth Defenders were slowly returning, drawn back by the light they couldn't explain. They found their leader weeping, their hostage offering comfort, and their certainties crumbling in the face of undeniable divine presence. "I saw him too," Sarah told them, her voice carrying in the hushed space, "when I was drowning last summer. Jesus showed me the same truth he showed Emily. And now you've seen it too, haven't you? Not just the light, but the love behind it." One by one, the men who had threatened us, who had been so sure of their righteous cause, sank to their knees. The golden light touched each of them, and I could feel through our shared connection the walls around their hearts beginning to crack. "What happens now?" one of them asked, looking lost. "We've committed crimes, we kidnapped her, we threatened." Now Father Michael stepped forward. "You have a choice. You can run from this experience, try to forget it, return to the comfort of rigid beliefs. Or you can help us share the truth about divine love, not through force or fear, but through testimony and transformation." James, ever practical even in the face of miracle, had called an ambulance despite my protests. As its sirens wailed in the distance, Michael Rivers made his decision. "I'll turn myself in," he said, standing slowly. "And while I serve whatever sentence I receive, I'll study this manuscript. I'll learn the truth I tried to suppress." He turned to Sarah, shame evident in his face. "Can you ever forgive me?" Sarah's response stunned everyone. She hugged him. "I already have," she said. "That's what this is all about, isn't it? Love that transcends our human notions of justice and revenge." The other truth defenders followed their leader's example, surrendering peacefully when the police arrived. But something had fundamentally changed in them. I could see it in their eyes. The same light that had filled the building now flickered within them. As paramedics rushed to stabilize my failing heart, I heard Michael Rivers giving his statement to the police. He was confessing everything, but he was also speaking about transformation, about divine love that could turn enemies into allies. "Emily," Sarah said, squeezing my hand as they loaded me into the ambulance, "what you did tonight, you could have just called the police. You could have let them face justice without offering redemption." "That wouldn't have been the truth Jesus showed us," I whispered, fighting to stay conscious. "Remember what he said about Benjamin's sacrifice? It wasn't just about the act itself, it was about showing a love so profound it could transform everyone it touched." Father Michael rode with us to the hospital, while James followed in his car with Sarah and Pastor William. In the ambulance, the golden light remained, softer but persistent, making the paramedics exchange wondering looks. "The truth defenders will probably go to prison," Father Michael mused, "but their testimony will reach people we never could. Who better to speak about transformation than those who have experienced it so dramatically?" I nodded, understanding flowing through me. The night's events hadn't just rescued Sarah, they had demonstrated the very truth we were trying to share. Love that transforms, forgiveness that heals, light that reveals rather than blinds. Later that night, safe in my hospital room with my heart stabilized, I received a message from Michael Rivers through his lawyer. "I understand now," he wrote. "The truth isn't something to be defended with weapons and threats. It's something that defends itself through love. Please forgive me for taking so long to see it." Sarah sat beside my bed, working on her laptop to update our website with the night's events. "People won't believe it," she said, pausing in her typing. "Some will," I replied. "And those who don't, well, maybe they'll see their own divine light one day." The truth about love, about sacrifice, about transformation, it couldn't be forced or defended with violence. It could only be revealed, experienced, and shared. The truth defenders had learned this lesson the hard way, but in doing so they had become powerful witnesses to the very truth they had once sought to suppress. The weeks following Sarah's rescue marked a steep decline in my health. The strain of channeling the divine presence had taken its toll, and no amount of medical intervention seemed able to slow my heart's failure. James practically lived in my hospital room now, monitoring every beat, every flutter, every sign of deterioration with growing desperation. "Your heart muscle is weakening faster than we anticipated," he explained one morning, dark circles under his eyes betraying his sleepless nights. "The medications aren't working like they should." He didn't need to say what we both knew: my time was running out much faster than we'd originally thought. The golden light remained with me constantly now, visible to everyone who entered my room. Medical staff had stopped trying to explain it, instead working around it like it was a familiar piece of medical equipment. Some even claimed they could feel its warmth, its comfort, as they went about their duties. Mother had taken to reading the Bible by my bedside, her voice trembling as she worked to reconcile her traditional faith with the truth I'd revealed. Perhaps, she said one afternoon, this is what Jesus meant when he said there were many things we weren't ready to understand in his time. Father stayed silent during these conversations, but I noticed him taking notes, recording everything he witnessed. The scientist in him, so like James, couldn't help but document this intersection of the miraculous and the medical. Sarah and Father Michael continued our work, sharing testimonies and the ancient manuscripts revelations through our growing online community. They would bring their laptops to my room, reading me messages from people whose lives were being transformed by the truth. But my body was giving out. Each day brought new challenges, difficulty breathing, irregular heartbeats, moments where the world would fade away only to snap back into focus with James shouting orders to nurses. "We need to consider a heart transplant," James insisted during a family meeting. "There's a facility in Cleveland." "No," I said firmly, my voice weak but certain. "This is how it's meant to be." "Damn it, Emily," James slammed his hand on the bedside table, making everyone jump. "You can't just give up, you have to fight." The golden light pulsed gently and I reached for his hand. "I'm not giving up, James. I'm fulfilling my purpose. Sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones for survival." That night, alone with my brother, I made him promise something. "When I'm gone, don't let this destroy your faith in science. What you've witnessed, the light, the healing, the divine presence, it doesn't invalidate your medical knowledge. It just shows there's more to discover." James wiped his eyes, trying to maintain his professional demeanor even as his sister slipped away. "How can you be so calm about this? You're only 12, Em. You should be worried about school dances and homework, not dying." "Because I'm not afraid," I told him. "Jesus showed me that death isn't an ending. It's just a transformation, like Benjamin's sacrifice was a transformation. The truth doesn't die with the messenger." My heart monitor beeped erratically, and James instantly switched back into doctor mode, adjusting medications and checking readings. But we both knew it was only buying time. The hardest part wasn't the physical pain or the weakness. It was watching my family struggle with what was coming. Mom's prayers grew more desperate, Dad's silence deeper, and James kept searching medical journals late into the night, looking for miracle treatments that might save his little sister. But amid the sadness, there was also a profound peace. The divine presence that had shown me the truth about love and sacrifice now carried me through each difficult day, teaching me that even this, my failing heart, my numbered days, was part of a greater purpose. As my strength ebbed, the light grew stronger, as if preparing to carry me home. As my health declined, the tensions within both my family and our wider community reached a breaking point. Mom and Dad stopped sleeping in the same room, their fundamental disagreement about my experiences creating a chasm that widened daily. Dad had begun to accept the truth I'd shared, while Mom clung desperately to traditional doctrine, as if holding on to it could somehow save my life. "We need to be praying for healing," Mom insisted one evening, her Bible clutched to her chest. "Not spreading these different interpretations." "Different interpretations," Dad's voice was sharp. "Helen, you've seen the light yourself. You've read the manuscript. How can you still deny what's happening to our daughter?" Their argument echoed down the hospital corridor, making nurses exchange uncomfortable glances. James stood in the doorway, torn between his role as a doctor and as a son, watching our parents' marriage crumble under the weight of divine truth. The division spread beyond our home. Our church community split into three distinct camps: those who believed my testimony in the ancient manuscript, those who denounced it as heresy, and those caught uncertainly in between. Longtime friends stopped speaking to each other. Sunday services became tense affairs, with people choosing sides of the sanctuary based on their beliefs. Pastor Williams' support of my message had cost him his position. The church board had asked for his resignation, calling his embrace of these new ideas a dangerous departure from sound doctrine. Half the congregation had followed him when he started holding alternative services in his home. "They kicked us out of the children's ministry," Sarah told me, her voice tight with hurt. Said they couldn't have someone who supported false teachings influencing young minds. Her parents had pulled her out of our church entirely, but the rejection still stung. The local ministerial alliance had publicly denounced our website and the growing movement around it. Only Father Michael stood firmly with us despite pressure from his superiors. He'd been reassigned to a small rural parish as punishment, but he continued his support through daily visits and online posts. James watched all this with growing bitterness. "Is this what divine truth does?" he asked one night, after another heated argument between our parents. "Tears families apart? destroys communities? Sometimes I whispered, my strength fading, old structures have to break before new ones can form. Remember what Jesus said about new wine and old wineskins. The golden light that filled my room seemed to emphasize the divisions, comfortable and warming to some, disturbing and alien to others. Hospital staff would request transfers to different floors, unable to reconcile what they witnessed in my room with their worldview. Even the medical community began taking sides. Some doctors sought permission to study the light phenomenon, while others dismissed it as mass hysteria or an elaborate hoax. James found himself increasingly isolated among his colleagues, his reputation as a rational scientist questioned because he refused to deny what he'd seen. One evening, I overheard Mom crying in the chapel. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she sobbed as Dad tried to comfort her. "If we're wrong about this, what else are we wrong about? How can I trust anything?" "Maybe that's the point," Dad replied gently. "Maybe we're not supposed to just trust what we've been told. Maybe we're supposed to experience truth for ourselves." Their voices faded as my consciousness drifted, but their words stayed with me. Every great truth, every paradigm shift had caused division before bringing transformation. Jesus' original message had divided families and communities too. The truth about divine love wasn't meant to maintain comfortable structures, it was meant to transform them. Sarah took to documenting the divisions as they occurred, seeing them as part of the larger story. "People need to know this isn't easy," she said. "That accepting new truth comes with a cost." The cost was evident in every strained family dinner, every empty church pew, every former friend who turned away in the hospital hallway. But beneath the surface of all this pain and division, something else was growing, a new kind of community, one built not on shared doctrine but on shared experience of divine love. As my heart grew weaker, I held on to this hope that from these broken pieces something beautiful would emerge. The transformation of our community happened gradually, then all at once. It began with small gestures, Mom and Dad holding hands again during hospital visits, former church friends who had shunned us quietly returning to ask questions, the nurses who had requested transfers coming back to witness the golden light for themselves. James's scientific evidence and Pastor Williams' historical discoveries had created a foundation that even the staunchest skeptics couldn't entirely dismiss, but it was the personal transformations that truly unified our divided community. Michael Rivers, speaking from prison through video calls, shared his story of transformation with such raw honesty that many of his former followers began to question their own rigid beliefs. Our church building, which had stood nearly empty after the split, began filling again, not with people seeking traditional services, but with those gathering to share experiences of divine presence. The golden light that had once caused such controversy now filled the sanctuary during these gatherings, visible to everyone, denying no one its warmth. Mom finally broke her silence one Sunday morning, standing before the congregation with tears streaming down her face. "I was so afraid," she admitted, "afraid that accepting this new truth meant losing my faith. Instead, I found a deeper faith I never knew was possible." Dad stood beside her, their hands clasped tightly, their years of marriage strengthened rather than broken by this journey. Sarah's parents, who had once pulled her from the church, became leaders in our growing community of transformed believers. They organized support groups for families struggling to reconcile traditional faith with expanded understanding, creating safe spaces for questions and doubts. Even my medical team, who had started as skeptical observers, began incorporating moments of silence in their rounds, acknowledging the presence of something their instruments could measure but not fully explain. James led weekly discussions where science and spirituality weren't opponents but partners in understanding divine truth. The local ministerial alliance, which had once denounced us, invited Pastor William to share his research. Father Michael's small rural parish became a center for studying the ancient texts, drawing scholars and seekers from around the world. The very institutions that had resisted change were beginning to embrace transformation. Through it all, I watched from my hospital bed as the divisions that had threatened to tear us apart became bridges to deeper understanding. The truth about divine love wasn't just changing individual hearts, it was reshaping entire communities, proving that unity doesn't require uniformity of belief, only openness to larger truth. The golden light that had first appeared to me now belonged to everyone, its presence a constant reminder that divine love transcends our human boundaries and breaks down our carefully constructed walls. As my own time grew shorter, I witnessed the miracle I had prayed for, not just acceptance of a new truth, but the transformation of an entire community through the power of divine love. On my final night, the hospital room glowed brighter than ever before, the golden light pulsing with a warmth that drew everyone close. James had stopped checking the monitors, instead holding my hand as tears rolled silently down his cheeks. Mom and Dad sat on my other side, their arms around each other, while Sarah perched at the foot of my bed, her laptop open to our website where thousands of messages of love and support poured in. "Are you afraid?" Sarah whispered, echoing the question I'd asked her months ago. I smiled, feeling the divine presence stronger than ever. How can I be? This isn't an ending, it's a transformation, just like Benjamin's was. The truth doesn't die with the messenger. Father Michael and Pastor William stood together near the window, their former religious divisions forgotten as they witnessed the culmination of our journey. The room was filled with others, 2 nurses who had watched me heal impossible wounds, doctors who had documented unexplainable phenomena, former truth defenders who had found a deeper faith through love rather than fear. "The work will continue," I said, my voice weak but clear. "The light isn't just mine anymore, it belongs to all of you now. Each of you carries a piece of this truth." James squeezed my hand, his scientific mind finally at peace with mysteries he couldn't fully explain. "We'll make sure everyone knows your story, Em. The research, the manuscripts, the testimonies, nothing will be lost." "Not my story," I corrected gently. "The story of divine love that's bigger than any one of us. The truth that Jesus and Benjamin showed us, that love transforms everything it touches." The light grew brighter, and I felt a familiar presence approaching. Just like that first time after the accident, Jesus stood before me, his love filling the room. Everyone could see him now, their faces transformed with wonder. "It's time," he said gently, extending his hand. I looked at my family one last time, at James's newfound balance of faith and science, at my parents' strengthened love, at Sarah's unwavering friendship, at the community that had learned to embrace a larger truth. The legacy wasn't in my words or even in my experience, it was in how divine love had transformed them all. "Thank you," I whispered, reaching for Jesus' hand, "for letting me be part of this." As I stepped into the light, I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Look, the light, it's everywhere." The golden radiance had indeed spread beyond my room, flowing through the hospital corridors, touching everyone it encountered. My last earthly awareness was of love expanding, transforming, unifying, the truth about divine love continuing its eternal work through countless hearts and hands. I had completed my mission, but the story was far from over. It was only beginning. If Emily's journey of divine truth and transformation has touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and your story could inspire others who are seeking deeper understanding. Support our team's mission to spread this message of love and truth by subscribing to our channel. Each subscription helps us reach more people with stories that matter. Share this video with friends and family who might need to hear this message of hope and transformation. Together we can build a community of understanding and acceptance. Don't forget to like this video, it helps others find this story of faith, science, and divine love. Join us on this continuing journey of discovery and transformation. Your engagement makes a difference. The transformation of our community happened gradually, then all at once. It began with small gestures, Mom and Dad holding hands again during hospital visits, former church friends who had shunned us quietly returning to ask questions, the nurses who had requested transfers coming back to witness the golden light for themselves. James's scientific evidence and Pastor William's historical discoveries had created a foundation that even the staunchest skeptics couldn't entirely dismiss. But it was the personal transformations that truly unified our divided community. Michael Rivers, speaking from prison through video calls, shared his story of transformation with such raw honesty that many of his former followers began to question their own rigid beliefs. Our church building, which had stood nearly empty after the split, began filling again, not with people seeking traditional services, but with those gathering to share experiences of divine presence. The golden light that had once caused such controversy now filled the sanctuary during these gatherings, visible to everyone, denying no one its warmth. Mom finally broke her silence one Sunday morning, standing before the congregation with tears streaming down her face. "I was so afraid," she admitted. afraid that accepting this new truth meant losing my faith. Instead, I found a deeper faith I never knew was possible. Dad stood beside her, their hands clasped tightly, their years of marriage strengthened rather than broken by this journey. Sarah's parents, who had once pulled her from the church, became leaders in our growing community of transformed believers. They organized support groups for families struggling to reconcile traditional faith with expanded understanding, creating safe spaces for questions and doubts. Even my medical team, who had started as skeptical observers, began incorporating moments of silence in their rounds, acknowledging the presence of something their instruments could measure but not fully explain. James led weekly discussions where science and spirituality weren't opponents but partners in understanding divine truth. The local ministerial alliance, which had once denounced us, invited Pastor William to share his research. Father Michael's small rural parish became a center for studying the ancient texts, drawing scholars and seekers from around the world. The very institutions that had resisted change were beginning to embrace transformation. Through it all, I watched from my hospital bed as the divisions that had threatened to tear us apart became bridges to deeper understanding. The truth about divine love wasn't just changing individual hearts, it was reshaping entire communities, proving that unity doesn't require uniformity of belief, only openness to larger truth. The golden light that had first appeared to me now belonged to everyone, its presence a constant reminder that divine love transcends our human boundaries and breaks down our carefully constructed walls. As my own time grew shorter, I witnessed the miracle I had prayed for, not just acceptance of a new truth, but the transformation of an entire community through the power of divine love. On my final night, the hospital room glowed brighter than ever before, the golden light pulsing with a warmth that drew everyone close. James had stopped checking the monitors, instead holding my hand as tears rolled silently down his cheeks. Mom and Dad sat on my other side, their arms around each other, while Sarah perched at the foot of my bed, her laptop open to our website where thousands of messages of love and support poured in. "Are you afraid?" Sarah whispered, echoing the question I'd asked her months ago. I smiled, feeling the divine presence stronger than ever. "How can I be? This isn't an ending, it's a transformation, just like Benjamin's was. The truth doesn't die with the messenger." Father Michael and Pastor William stood together near the window, their former religious divisions forgotten, as they witnessed the culmination of our journey. The room was filled with others, 2 nurses who had watched me heal impossible wounds, doctors who had documented unexplainable phenomena, former truth defenders who had found a deeper faith through love rather than fear. "The work will continue," I said, my voice weak but clear. "The light isn't just mine anymore, it belongs to all of you now. Each of you carries a piece of this truth." James squeezed my hand, his scientific mind finally at peace with mysteries he couldn't fully explain. "We'll make sure everyone knows your story, Em. The research, the manuscripts, the testimonies, nothing will be lost." "Not my story," I corrected gently. "The story of divine love that's bigger than any one of us. The truth that Jesus and Benjamin showed us, that love transforms everything it touches." The light grew brighter and I felt a familiar presence approaching. Just like that first time after the accident, Jesus stood before me, his love filling the room. Everyone could see him now, their faces transformed with wonder. "It's time," he said gently, extending his hand. I looked at my family one last time, at James's newfound balance of faith and science, at my parents' strengthened love, at Sarah's unwavering friendship, at the community that had learned to embrace a larger truth. The legacy wasn't in my words or even in my experience, it was in how divine love had transformed them all. "Thank you," I whispered, reaching for Jesus' hand, "for letting me be part of this." As I stepped into the light, I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Look. The light, it's everywhere." The golden radiance had indeed spread beyond my room, flowing through the hospital corridors, touching everyone it encountered. My last earthly awareness was of love expanding, transforming, unifying, the truth about divine love continuing its eternal work through countless hearts and hands. I had completed my mission, but the story was far from over. It was only beginning. If Emily's journey of divine truth and transformation has touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and your story could inspire others who are seeking deeper understanding. Support our team's mission to spread this message of love and truth by subscribing to our channel. Each subscription helps us reach more people with stories that matter. Share this video with friends and family who might need to hear this message of hope and transformation. Together, we can build a community of understanding and acceptance. Don't forget to like this video. It helps others find this story of faith, science, and divine love. Join us on this continuing journey of discovery and transformation. Your engagement makes a difference.